Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Forgotten Hockey Players of Broadway, a nostalgic look back at our favorite Rangers from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I'm Tom Browning, along with my co-host Rob Berger. We can be heard on Google Play, iHeartRadio, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and of course, our website at gotommyboyproductions.libsyn.com. That's gotommyboyproductions.libsyn.com. Please check it out. You can capture all of our episodes on our webpage. You can contact us by just clicking on the contact bar. You can leave a message. We'd love to hear from you. Love to hear about the players that you would like for us to profile. Love to hear about maybe some of the seasons other than the 60s, 70s, and 80s that really made an impact on you as a fan. Again, we will be going off the menu every once in a while. We'll be talking about the current day New York Rangers, the state of the franchise, and again, we love to talk about previous playoff games, impactful trades that took place in New York Rangers history. So wherever you listen to us, please hit subscribe. It's free. So without further ado, here are your hosts, Tom Browning and Rob Berger. Welcome to another edition of the Forgotten Hockey Players of Broadway. I'm Tom Browning, along with my great friend and co-host Rob Berger. Rob, how you doing today, bud?
Hey, Tom. Getting ready for playoffs. Unfortunately, without the Rangers. I think we kind of expected that, but still looking forward to the playoffs and still have the high of last night's draft lottery.
Yeah, we got a busy show today, and unfortunately we didn't get a chance to get a show in during the month of March, but busy show today here in April. We'll talk about our person of interest, Glen Sather, the outgoing president of the New York Rangers, and of course the draft, and maybe just touch a little bit on the end of the season performance of the Rangers and their prospects going forward. Yeah, I guess we should start off on the very exciting and unpredictable draft lottery that took place last night for the National Hockey League.
Yeah, a lot of teams, specifically the Colorado Avalanche and Los Angeles Kings, had a rough go last night with the Blackhawks and Rangers moving into the top three.
Yeah, it was very unexpected. Obviously, the Rangers were, I guess, in the 7th position. They wound up number 3, which is actually the first time since, I guess, Brad Park was drafted number 2 back in 1966 that they're going to have a top 3 pick. And, of course, we're all keeping our fingers crossed that they would get number 1 for the first time in their history. And the opportunity may be to select Jack Hughes. But I think when all's said and done, Cappy, as I'm sure he'll be called pretty soon by Ranger fans, will probably fit the team better going forward with what David Quinn and Jeff Gordon are trying to build here in New York.
Yeah, I think he'll be ready to step in. He's a big kid. He's already 6'2", 185 pounds, so he's only going to get bigger. Hey, if he can bring in some offense and some toughness, 2 things the Rangers desperately need, he will be a great fit. Now, as good as Jack Hughes is, I think there might be some confusion about where he's going to play when he makes the NHL. If he's a center, or if they're going to move him to the wing, obviously he's a world-class talent. But if the Rangers can get the fin at number 2, that's totally fine. And definitely, Jeff Gordon woke up a lot happier today than he was yesterday.
Absolutely, it's funny when they were panning in on Jeff Gordon during with each and every selection. He had that look of wow. This is really happening. We're actually going to have a top 3 pick. And, of course, figures Ray Shero would get the number 1 pick after he got Nico a couple years ago. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Jack Hughes as a winger. I don't know. I mean, you want your wingers skilled, of course, and quick. Obviously, it's a fast game today, but I'm not sure if he has the size to be a winger in the National Hockey League. I think that would be a real grind for a guy like Hughes. I mean, he's a small guy. I mean, he's not going to grow much bigger. He's just not. I just don't think he's it's in his genes, the DNA. I don't think he's going to be growing all that much between now and the time he's 20, 21 years old. So I think center iceman is probably where he's going to be. But for the Rangers, the last thing they need is another diminutive type of player. And, he might become another Davey Keon or even a Matthew Barzal. I mean, he's got that. And listen, Patrick Kane is a smallish player, and he's a winger, and he's carved out a terrific, Hall of Fame career with the Blackhawks. So he might be successful as a winger. But I think the finished play for the Rangers, will fit better. A tough, hard-nosed, elite player, maybe another Malkin type. What do you think?
I just think it's great that you drew comparisons to Barzal and Dave Keon, ranging 50 years of hockey play.
Yeah, I'm giving away my age. Davey Keon really stands out to me, and I don't know, maybe Marcel Dionne, although Marcel was, a lot shorter than even Jack Hughes. Those type of players were successful. With the Rangers, you had Mark Pavlich, although Mark was a very tough, hard-nosed, stocky, strong player for a guy his size. But, yeah, I think he reminds me, looking at the highlights, of a Keon type and maybe a Matthew Barzal. And I think the Devils have a good player there. Now they got Nico, and they've got probably Jack Hughes. But wouldn't that be something if Shiro pulls a fast one and goes and goes with Cappy as opposed to Jack Hughes? Wouldn't that be a real twist?
I don't think I'd be totally surprised. I know the coverage on NBC was Jack Hughes, and probably especially because he's American. But if you do some reading, there's been a lot out there saying that Hughes could fall to number 2.
Yeah.
And with Ray Shero, nothing would surprise me.
No.
To think, what is that? What do the Devils need more? I don't know. We still have time, right? We've got over 2 months until this draft happens. So, listen, so much can happen. I wouldn't be surprised if New Jersey flipped the pick. Who knows?
Wouldn't that be something? I mean, they have 2 months for this to really marinate, if you will. And who knows, maybe Shiro will fall victim to all the positive press about the Rangers getting this player and being a franchise player for the Rangers and fitting the skill set that David Quinn and Jeff Gordon are looking for, building the team around. And maybe he gets talked into giving Cappy a second look and makes that decision. It would typically be the Rangers' luck. After everybody getting so pumped up and sky high about Cappy that it doesn't happen and they have to go with the smallish Jack Hughes or somebody else. It wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility, that's for sure. Yeah. That would be something. I mean, that would be a blockbuster move. That would be the talk of the National Hockey League draft if that happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was wondering, there's some talk about Chris Kreider being on the trading block. And, I know he was hurt. That probably contributed to his decline in production the last half of the year or last 30, 40 games of the season. But there is talk that he may be moved. And I'm wondering if Bowman of Chicago would entertain giving up his third selection for 28 goal scorer Chris Kreider, and maybe another selection, maybe a late first-round pick that the Rangers have, maybe Tampa's, Winnipeg's, or maybe even a second-rounder, maybe include a young defenseman that the Rangers recently acquired in trades last year for the number 3 selection. I think that would be a very interesting opportunity for the Rangers. What do you think? I
think it'll be tough for anybody to pick up Kreider before the season, unless they can sign him. So he has one more year left on his deal. $4.6 million. I would like something to happen with Kreider because I think the Rangers will be better next season. I think this albatross of him, Nestikov, Ryan Strome, Jimmy Vesey, and Jesper Fast are all free agents after next season. So that's a huge problem for Gorton. And is he going to sign these guys? Does he move them? It's tough you can't, for a team like Chicago, to pick up a Kreider if they're not going to sign him.
Well, I would think they probably would. I think Bowman would probably give him the money, but I can see him fitting into the Kane Tays line, fast and skilled, and maybe he plays a role that Brendan Saad played the year that the Blackhawks won the Cup. And if you throw in maybe a late first-round pick for Bowman or maybe one of the defensemen the Rangers acquired, maybe even a Brett Howden type of player, make it a blockbuster, I can see where Bowman trying to build back this team to Stanley Cup contention with a new coach. I can see where Kreider might fit the type of player he's looking for. I just don't think he's going to fit. I don't think he fits David Quinn's mindset. I don't think Kreider's reliable enough or consistent enough for Quinn. He just isn't as physical enough for a guy that size, I think, for Quinn's liking. And I think, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if Kreider is moved prior to the draft. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, this year wasn't the best of years for Chris Kreider. He still came in. He almost hit the 30-goal mark. But the Rangers really struggled scoring this year. They were bottom of the Eastern Conference, bottom 3 in goals scored. And how much can a guy, is this the best that Chris Kreider is going to get? 28 goals. Is he ever going to crack 30 goals, 30 or 40 assists? I don't know. I don't know how much he's worth anymore going into his 28th season.
Yeah, that remains to be seen. I don't know if you're going to get much better than Kreider. I mean, what is he? Like you said, I think he's going to be in his late 20s now, and he just has not ever been consistent. He just, I think the coaches could live with his 22 to 28 goals per season if he brought physicality to the rink each and every game, but he doesn't do that. He doesn't really create the time and space for his players, or he's not the first one in a when there's a little bit of a scrum to protect his players. He's just not that type of player. He's just and I think Quinn wants that. He loves the fact that his teammates stick up for each other, and even Ryan Strome. I think Strome came into his own. I think Quinn likes that New York Islander DNA that Strome has, that grittiness. Even a guy like Strome was undersized, but I think he showed a lot of physical toughness this year. He showed a lot of leadership, and he scored 19 goals. And maybe Quinn is the guy that gets the most out of Ryan Strome and really catapults him to the talent and to the career that everybody thought, especially the New York Islanders thought when they drafted him. And I guess he was the 5th selection 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah. Yes. No. Actually, both Strome brothers had great years this year. I think I read a number that they were the best. They had the best production for guys traded last year or the last couple of years. So, it's going to be a really busy offseason for the New York Rangers.
It is. The questions, like you said, Jimmy Vesey, does he come back? He's another kid with maddening talent, but again, disappears for long stretches. Don't know if he's got the heart or the physical wherewithal to really give it his all each and every game. He seems to shy away from the physical part of the game, and you wonder what Jesper Fast being injured, and can they afford a Jesper Fast with some of the young players they need to make room for? What are they going to do? Chris Kreider we talked about already, and you're going to have to find some room for some of these young defensemen that they brought in last year, and so there's a lot of question marks. Georgiev had a great season. Is somebody finally going to make an aggressive move for Lundqvist? Maybe San Jose. We talked about San Jose, I think the last 4 or 5 shows we talked about San Jose. If they fail in the playoffs, do they actually make an offer for Lundqvist that Gorton can't refuse and that Lundqvist would have to live with,
I think a lot of that depends on the playoffs and what Jones or Arundel can do in the playoffs. If Martin Jones comes out strong and they do well in the first round, I think his job is safe.
Well, that would definitely be going against their respective hockey cards, right? Their bubblegum cards. I mean, have they ever really come on in the playoffs and played well?
Who, the Sharks or Martin Jones?
The Shark. Well, Martin Jones and the Shark goaltenders, Dell and Jones. I mean, they seemed very up and down in the playoffs and in the regular season, right? I mean, have they ever dominated for a consistent period of time in the playoffs?
Yeah, I guess not. I mean, I guess the exception would be their cup run a few years ago. And it's a shame. We could talk at a later time about great players to never win a cup, but I think we're going to see that with Joe Thornton.
And Pavelski and a few others, right? Yeah, just that's a team that kind of remind me of the old New York Rangers from the 70s. Although the Rangers I think had better goaltending back then with Jockeman and Villemure, but they're a very talented team that just comes up short time and time again during the Stanley Cup playoffs. But what other moves do you see the Rangers maybe contemplating, or how would you assess the year they had, Coach Quinn, maybe some of the veteran players, some of the younger players? We didn't talk about Hedel much or Elias Anderson, some of their prospects. Buchnevich finally seemed like he's put it together. Had a great second half of the season. I think he's found the missing ingredient there. And it's funny. It seems like every time a player steps up and plays more physical, they always seem to produce more on the ice on the stat sheet as well.
Listen, I mean, to go back to your first question, I think this year turned out how we expected it to turn out. Didn't make the playoffs, made some moves, really setting the stage for the future. The big albatrosses are these contracts, but the silver lining is that draft pick. The other big albatross is in goal. It's been well documented on the show how I feel about Lundqvist. But nonetheless, I can't imagine a scenario where the only way he's leaving is if he retires.
Which, I mean, how does a GM look? themselves in the mirror when you have a high-priced, high-profile player with an albatross of a contract. How do you let that player dictate how the rest of the team performs or how the rest of the team is comprised, made up? I don't know how you can do it. I mean, he's kind of the Eli Manning of the New York Rangers. You know, as I said to you before the show, you never see Manning and Lundqvist in the same room together. I wonder if they're one and the same. I mean, it's just, I don't know how you can, in good conscience, how you can hold the rest of the team hostage with a player that is obviously now, even to the most blind of fans, you can see the decline, the eye test on the ice with this guy. I mean, the continuous giving up of late goals, whether it be in regulation or in overtime, soft goals. I mean, you've got a great young talent in Georgiev. You got someone that may be even better in Shesterkin coming up from the KHL next year. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how you can do that. And I'm sure there are teams that are going to be interested in Lundqvist next season. I just don't know how Gordon can really live with that, without at least entertaining some offers for him. But
I think I don't at this point. I don't think it's Lundqvist holding them hostage. I think it's the fact that he's not going to be wanted going into next season.
He's not even wanted in his own locker room, I don't think, Rob. I don't think he's got the support of his teammate. I don't think he's a real likable guy in that. I mean, it's not above him to throw his teammates under the bus, critiquing their play when he has, he hasn't been held accountable. He's not the most accountable guy in the locker room. I mean, it seems like he's always willing to make excuses and throw his teammates under the bus. And I don't know. I just don't think they like playing for him,
And just to think, going into next season, there's a decent amount of free agent goalies. We still, Bobrovsky being the biggest name. Varlamov is out there, Mike Smith, Cam Talbot, Cam Ward. These are guys that can give you a year or two to hold things together. Robin Lehner coming off a great year. He's only 26. Peter Mrazek from Carolina is only 26. Keith Kincaid, who was a strong backup in New Jersey, he's a free agent. So there are guys out there, and if you want to talk about big name goalies that are on the trade block, Jonathan Quick is potentially on the trade block too, and he's younger than Lundqvist.
Yeah, I can see the Kings doing it. Now, why would the Kings be so ready to do it? They've already won a couple of cups because they're a smart organization, and I think they see the opportunity. And I think Quick is probably professional enough to understand that in order for the Kings to move forward, he may have to move forward to another opportunity himself. And I think Quick still has a lot left if he can stay healthy. But there's always seemed to be a lot of good quality goalies on the market every year. That's one position that always seems to have a surplus of available talent. Although I don't see the Islanders, if they can go far in the playoffs, I don't think they're going to want to mess with their, with the formula right now in goal, because Greiss and Lehner have both had outstanding seasons. I mean, they're both in play for the Vezina this year. I think they're both, right?
Absolutely.
And the kid out of St. Louis has come on
Binnington.
Yeah. I mean,
it's a great transition, because when we talk about where this organization is and how their youth has been developed and moves they've made, we're seeing the departure of Glen Sather. For those that have been following hockey for a while, it's an interesting comparison. Who did he leave in worse shape, the Oilers or the Rangers?
Well, I think Glen Sather actually had a renaissance with Edmonton. Well after Messier left and Gretzky left, he actually was coach of the year. I think in 85, 86, or was it late? Maybe was it the early 90s?
He was, but he also depleted that organization. And one of my favorite stats about his period in Edmonton is that from 1982 to 2000. He had 17 first-round picks. Only Jeff Bukaboom and Jason Arnott did anything. Yeah. For the Oilers, which is kind of similar to a situation we have here in New York right now, of a guy that, there was never a pipeline when you look at the teams that were super successful over the last decade. He's been here for almost 2 decades. But if you take the last 10, 15 years, your Chicagos, your LAs, your Tampa Bay, that have really, even Winnipeg to an extent, that have built from,
Pittsburgh.
Through the
Penguins
Pittsburgh is a great example. Washington, another one. The Rangers can never compete with that.
No. But, I wonder if Peter Pocklington, the former owner of Edmonton, I think that he also may have, played a role in convincing Sather that, we have to keep this franchise viable. I'm just wondering if he had a big role in giving away a lot of those draft picks for established players just to keep the team competitive and fans coming into the seats. And I don't know, you have to give credit for the draft picks to build that team up, which Sather did really by himself. He built that incredibly deep and skilled Edmonton Oilers team from the last few years of the WHA, which actually Sather was a player for the Edmonton Oilers, in the WHA as well. But he really built that team up. So he was a very astute GM when it came to identifying young talent. With the Rangers, I don't know what happened. I just think he just felt impulsively, maybe he felt that he had to continue what he did in Edmonton, and that is try to bring in marquee players at the expense of draft picks. But you're right. He did not do the Rangers any favors with trading away all those number one picks and not drafting well with Gordie Clark as his main guy. I mean, they had a very checkered, uneven draft history with the picks that they did have.
Yeah, and he's brought in some good young talent since he's been here. If you think of guys, obviously Lundqvist, you think of Dubinsky, Stahl, Stepan,
Callahan,
Chris Kreider, who we just talked about. But no one, if you sit back and think of a Ranger superstar that Sather drafted, other than Lundqvist, there's not much.
Yeah, and Lundqvist was almost, you have to say that was kind of a fluke because they drafted him in the 7th round. You got to wonder if they really felt that strong about Lundqvist being a potential superstar. They wouldn't have waited to the round 7 to draft him, right?
Oh, absolutely. And, it's really, I like to do the 20-year test. 20 years after Sather's done here in New York, how will we look back at this era?
Very uneven.
So close. And, you look at that 2012 to 2015-16 period. They only made the final once. Should that team have done more? I think the teams in the early part of his tenure weren't that great. They came out of the lockout very well. The Yager years, but he never presided over a team that won. Only one team that came close.
Yeah, I think that what undid the Rangers or really undermined their ultimate success was the fact that Glen Sather and Gordie Clark really traded away all their top draft picks for established veterans, and it failed. I think John Tortorella, in advancing the Rangers to the semifinals or the conference finals against the Devils, was the reason that team overachieved. And I think AV did the same thing. Alain Vigneault did the same thing. I think when the Rangers went to the Cup finals against the Kings, I really felt that AV, as did Tortorella, got the very, very most out of that team. And I think those teams were overachievers. I don't think that they were a disappointment in that the talent should have been enough to win the Stanley Cup. I really don't believe that. I really felt that AV and Tortorella advanced that club far further than most coaches would have been able to. I just don't think the talent, they really didn't have any high-end talent. They didn't have any game-breaking goal scorers, not a one. You had underperformers like Rick Nash, who never produced to the extent that they were hoping. One could talk about, I'll talk about Lundqvist till the cows come home about his lack of clutch play. And, the rest of the guys were just guys that overachieved. I mean, they were just guys. And they didn't have enough depth. They didn't have enough elite talent on that team to win Stanley Cups. And I think it really was Glen Sather and his lack of patience, maybe some sloppy and recklessness, that with the draft picks, I don't think any Stanley Cup team can win. A Stanley Cup winning team can actually go years without having a first-round pick. I don't think it's possible. If you look back at history, I would bet that very few teams, if any, have ever won a Stanley Cup without having first-round draft picks on their team. I just don't think that's possible, and I think that was the reason. I think he was better at trades. I think he had some decent trades in his career as a GM and president, but I think he crushed the organization with his the drafts and giving away all the first-round picks that they had.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, like you said, if you think of all the teams that have won the Cup in the last 15 years, all of them have drafted well.
Yeah.
Every single one. Even the teams that have made the final and lost in the final, lost, those teams also have drafted well. And you look at this season, even right now with Tampa Bay, drafted well. Boston. Also, you just look at the conference, drafted well. Toronto, with the extent, a lot of the guys in that, the core of that team, was drafted, are Toronto guys. So, I'll be curious to see how Gorton rebounds. Are we going to see a change in the direction of this organization?
Well, I think it already has. The last few years, they've kept their first-round picks. It coincided maybe with Sather stepping down as GM, and maybe Sather has, in fact, stepped away from the key decision-making responsibilities. Maybe, the fear I always had, and that a lot of Ranger fans had, was whether Sather was going to meddle, get in the way of Jeff Gorton being Jeff Gorton, the same, assistant GM and interim GM of the Bruins, where, he was able to bring in guys like Tuukka Rask and Brad Marchand and Milan Lucic and a few others. And maybe he has. I mean, the Rangers have kept their picks. And maybe Gorton is going to be able to blossom and become the GM that everyone thought he is very capable of being. So maybe to Sather's credit, he really has stepped away the last few years. I've always been skeptical of that. But you got to wonder, Rob, what you just mentioned. All the teams you just mentioned that have gone on to either win or become consistent contenders, they kept the number one picks. And you got to wonder, what was in Glen Sather's head? What made him think that he could go against all the data, the history, the fundamentals of being a great GM and doing it differently and expect a different result? You got to wonder what it was. Was it sloppiness? Was it laziness? Was it the fact that he wasn't patient enough or was convinced by ownership that they had to just make the playoffs and not worry about winning a championship? Maybe that was his mandate from MSG, from Dolan, and maybe other senior management within the organization that, we're not concerned with building a Stanley Cup winner. If we win, great, but we just want to fill the seats for as many playoff games as possible. You wonder if that had anything to do with it. I mean, the guy has had tremendous tenure. He's had basically a full-time pension, permanent pension with the New York Rangers in a lofty position. So I don't know.
That's a great point that we don't see, but behind the scenes, the priority of the organization. A lot of ownership groups in all four major North American sports, winning a championship isn't top priority. I think we see it a lot in baseball. Teams that don't spend but get a ton of revenue sharing, and that's enough for them. Teams like Oakland and Kansas City. I know Kansas City got hot, but at the end of the day, they're back at the bottom, and they'll probably be there for a while at Tampa Bay. The Rangers get one or two playoff series, they make a ton of money for the year. It's that simple. Getting 3 to 6 home playoff games is massive, to fill up the Garden. They make so much money that way. So maybe you're right. Maybe that's why he didn't re-sign Jágr. I don't know. He sure threw a lot of money at other players. We look at our defense, the defense right now, Girardi and so on, guys like Girardi and Mark Stahl. But that's a great point. I guess we'll never know, what the thinking was. Was it just to win enough games to get in the playoffs?
Lundqvist too. I mean, he threw a ton of money at Lundqvist. A great-looking guy with a Swedish name and face of the franchise. And, that's obviously another contract that is going to haunt the Rangers for the next several seasons. Wasn't Bobby Holik another one that he signed, or was that
No, he signed Bobby. No, he signed Bobby Holik. That was a horrible signing. I don't know if it was as bad as the Brian Trottier hiring, but Bobby Holik was a rough signing.
Yeah, I think some of his trades were a little bit better. He did bring in Sean Avery. He brought him in, and I guess he had traded. I think he traded Messier, right, to San Jose for the rights to Callahan. Isn't that the story? And then Messier became a free agent a day after that, and then re-signed with the Rangers. I think there was some, I think there was some trades that he made. Obviously, Brandon Prust came in. He got McDonough from Montreal. He had some good trades. He had his moments. Obviously, there were some trades that he did make that did work. The Gomez probably the biggest trade for McDonough. That was probably the biggest one he had. But Avery, I thought, was important at that point in time in the New York Rangers organization and history. I think Sean Avery was very effective for them. But, as a player, I really like Glen Sather. He only had 2 full years with the Rangers. He was a blood and guts type of player. He came up with the Bruins back in the late 60s, during a time where Harry Sinden was really building a hard-nosed, tough physical team. And, Glen Sather fit right in with those big bad Bruins of the late 60s and played with Bobby Orr and during Orr's first couple of years with the team and had some success, scored some goals. And then he went to Pittsburgh. He really blossomed into a full-time two-way hockey player. I believe he scored 15 goals one year with the Pens. And then the Rangers, Emo Francis, signed him or traded, Sil Apps, which was at the time, Sil Apps was a big up-and-coming star for the New York Rangers and didn't get off to the greatest of starts. And Emil lost a little patience with him and wound up trading Sil Apps to the Pittsburgh Penguins, and along with Sheldon Canninggeeser for Glen Sather. And Sil Apps went on to have an all-star career with the Penguins, and I think also had some time with the LA Kings as well. But Glen Sather filled a role with the Rangers. He really did, and he wound up playing against his old Bruin team during the 1972 Stanley Cup Finals, the year the Rangers lost to the Bruins in 6 games. So he was a fan favorite with the Rangers. He was a tough, hard-nosed player. And actually, a little trivia, he was actually the first player to ever score a goal at the Nassau Coliseum. It was the very first exhibition game between the New York Rangers and the New York Islanders. And Glen Sather was the first player to light the lamp at the Nassau Coliseum in the first period of a Ranger-Islander game. So that's a little trivia for you there, Rob, and the fans.
That's great. Hey, listen, different era of hockey where you could have a guy on the ice like that. But, that run in 72 you brought up against the Bruins, he played the entire postseason, didn't miss a game.
Yeah.
And he did that while only having 1 assist and didn't score a goal.
Never scored a playoff goal, Glen Sather.
Never. He scored 1.
Oh, did he?
I think. Yeah, he scored 1 for Montreal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and there's the 74-75 year. But he didn't. It'd be rare to see today a guy that he played 72 playoff games. He only had 6 points.
Yeah. Well, he had some penalty minutes. He had some penalty minutes.
Yeah. He actually played more for the Rangers than anybody else.
Yeah, he did.
And he had almost 200 penalty minutes in over 180 games. So he's a tough guy.
He was a Sean Avery type of player. He was like Kenny Linsman without the skill. He didn't have the goal scoring or the point getting ability of a Kenny Linsman or Brad Marchand, but he was an agitator. And very much like a Sean Avery type. Maybe and Sean Avery was even more talented than Glen Sather. But he had a cup of coffee, like you said, with Montreal. I think he won a cup with the Canadiens, didn't he? I think he actually won a Stanley Cup with Montreal. You may want to check on that, Rob. I think he may have won a cup with. Oh no, they lost. Was that 74? No, that was when the Flyers won the Stanley Cup that year, right?
Yeah.
So they beat Montreal, I think, that year. So maybe he didn't win a cup. But he played for the Minnesota, I believe, the North Stars as well, right? Didn't he play for Minnie?
He played in a lot of places, yeah. The closest he got to winning a cup was with the Rangers.
Right.
The 75 Canadians lost to Buffalo, who ended up losing. Who then ended up losing to. So he never got a cup there. He surely made up for his lack of cups as a player, though, in his coaching career and his GM career in Edmonton.
Yeah, you got to give the guy credit. He actually scored 19 goals, I think, his last year playing for Edmonton in the WHA, and then he went on to become a player coach, I think, was it that season he was a player coach where he scored 19, or was it the next year? I think he had player coach responsibilities for a while. Then he retired and became the full-time coach. But, he did draft some very good players. It's just a shame that he couldn't replicate that with the Rangers. More patient to draft some of the high-end talent that he did with Edmonton. And then, like you said, maybe Peter Pocklington, the owner, convinced him that he needed to trade away some of these picks for established players to keep the team solvent. And maybe he got so used to doing it that way. That's how he ran the Rangers. I don't know. But interesting player, and he's now going to be an advisor for the team. So I don't know if that's going to be more ceremonial or if he's still going to have his hand in the draft or being a counselor for Jeff Gorton. As long as he doesn't get too involved, I think we'll be happy as Ranger fans.
I think that's fair to say that it's time for the Rangers to go a new direction, which they've been on. It won't be really, nothing really changes probably from the day-to-day of hockey operations
right
now. But it's the culture. Which we'll see things with, hopefully they give Quinn enough time to develop his system, bring in the players he wants to fit into that system, Hopefully that translates to success on the ice, and it's not just more of the same, spinning wheels, getting close but not close enough year after year.
Right. Anything else that you want to add, Rob?
I don't think so. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer.
Yep.
He got so close here in New York. I think, obviously, don't know him or what he's thinking, but I'm sure it's difficult for him that the Rangers never lifted a cup during his tenure here with the Rangers, especially with how things ended in Edmonton. Especially, you look at he left that team. After he left, they had the great run in 06, a couple playoff series here or there, but they've only won, I think it's 5 or 6 playoff series since he's left. So that franchise is still in bad shape, and hopefully here in New York, it's a quick bounce back.
One of the all-time quotes in NHL history was when he was with Edmonton: "If I was a GM of the Rangers with all their money, I would win a cup every year." Unbelievable. He was a cocky guy, He always had that smirk on his face. I don't know if you remember watching the old Edmonton playoff games and him behind the bench, and as Edmonton was, winning games 9-2 and 8-3, and just steamrolling over everybody in the National Hockey League. He'd have that eating grin on his face, the smirk that would just that became known for. And unfortunately, could never replicate that with the Rangers, as you said, either as a coach, usually as an interim coach, or as a GM or president. Yeah, he's a Hall of Famer. Quite a character in his day too. A lot of personality and. Very outspoken. Although he didn't, he was kind of, he was outspoken, but he really wasn't the most press-friendly guy in his last few years as president of the Rangers. He really wasn't one to give a quote or to interact with the press much. And I'm wondering if that quote I just mentioned about winning a cup every year, maybe that humbled him a little bit as he got a little bit older.
Yeah, that's possibly true. Yeah, he's been definitely. We haven't seen a lot of him the past few years for sure.
No. Very quiet. All right, Rob. Well, listen, man, it was a good show. I think we'll get to Barry Beck. We've been putting him off. Tip everybody off that he'll be the next guy we talk about. He was a very interesting New York Ranger, and we'll get to Barry hopefully sometime later in April or early in May, and we'll touch on the playoffs, see who's around and who has been eliminated during our next show. So on behalf of Rob Berger, this is Tom Browning for the Forgotten Hockey Players of Broadway. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you for listening. This has been a Go Tommy Boy production.